Welcome to Module 2, the life cycle of a construction project, and that's the two phases. So what do we need to know? The two phases of a construction project, that's the pre-construction phase and then the construction phase. When we look at the construction project, we're going to think of that client right up front. Let's think about it. A client wants a project done. That could be building, like we say, in a barn. It could be building, it could be a loft conversion. If it's in their house, that's going to be obviously a domestic client. But that project is going to have a start and a finish. So it's really important to think of CDM by way of the life cycle. And that's the two phases. So the first phase is that pre-construction phase, before any construction starts. That second phase is the construction phase. And what it's also really important to think, we can see in the center there, that phase one, that pre-construction phase, can also be known as the design phase, because this is where we have to design in safety. That's designing safety into the project. Two phases. That first phase there, we can see, so the client's got number one, health and safety, written above them there, and we can see number two for health and safety, because there's three really important people. If we look at number two now, we have the introduction of the principal designer. They are somebody who's appointed in writing, and they also are going to work with other designers. We will go more through the duties when we come to that module. We're just looking at the construction phase. But that principal designer is responsible for construction, for the health and safety in that pre-construction phase. They are going to usually give that guidance to the client. They're there in support of the client on the type of property. That's important because that type of property is going to determine the type of client. Remember, if we are a client if we're just going to get some work done on our own property, we're not going to understand the CDM regulations, and neither do we need to. The principal designer is that person who gives that advice. They're going to be involved on a construction project with more than one contractor. So we can see a principal designer giving advice to that client. Within that pre-construction phase, we've got the client brief. Again, we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. That's ultimately the client saying what that project is. So we can see there, they'll give the client's expectations, limitations, budget, planning, constraints, timescales, safety and design, what has happened to the risk register, RAG list. Now, important, I've put this as a little bit of a red flag because this client brief is really important for health and safety. It does not have to be written down. There's no legal requirement for that. But it is beneficial because then it can be reviewed as we go along. That's the client giving their expectations for what they want the project to be. Often when an organisation has had an accident or an incident, when we start doing that investigation, quite often it will be stated that the timelines have slid to the right-hand side. Things were getting pushed. However, we still had the same amount of time. So really important, the client has that overall input and legal responsibility for that client, for that construction phase, for the entire phases when they are a commercial client. The health and safety file, we've got to consider that. That starts getting to be put together in the phase one, the construction phase. It will also be in phase two when we go there. Then we have the pre-construction information. That's really important. That's going to be coming from the client. The principal designer is going to pull that out. And because that pre-construction information is going to be needed by the principal contractor. And you can see I've put the principal contractor there as really important, number 3. And between the client, the principal designer, and the principal contractor, it is those 3 appointments or people that are going to be responsible for working to get together for the health and safety across the entire project. The pre-construction information required by the principal contractor because they need in the pre-construction phase to develop their construction phase plan. The construction phase plan must contain 20 health and safety elements that are required within part 4 of the regulations. That's generally your normal health and safety requirements that we tend to see all the time as normal practitioners. When we move on, The F10, does the project require notification? This all must happen in the pre-construction phase, phase 1. It's going to need notification if it's above 30 working days plus above 20 workers, but also if it's above 500 person days. That's really important to be mindful of. When we move into phase 2, the construction phase, this is when the principal contractor comes into their own, because we've now got work to be done. Shovels are in the ground, we could say that. The principal contractor is responsible for that phase. We must ensure there's welfare on site. We can see that I've put welfare up with the client because the client must ensure that welfare is on site. The principal contractor, when they were bidding or tendering for the work, they should have ensured that they've considered the welfare requirements. But we can see multiple things from toilets, sanitary, hot water, soap, somewhere for warming food and boiling a kettle, drinking water, keeping your clothes clean, welfare where we can sit down to eat our food, and also somewhere that is warm enough in the winter and cool enough in the summer. Welfare facilities are really important, as is security. The site must be secure. We can see there's a specific regulation there, Regulation 18, for the security of site. That security and the site must be kept in good working order. We welcome the health and safety file back, so we can see it's been considered in the pre-construction phase where all information is going into it. We will cover it more in a further module, but we can see the health and safety file actually goes on further than the actual finish time of the project, because it is contained within it are going to be guides for any subsequent projects. The health and safety file, as required by the CDM regs, is only required when there are more than one contractor. I think that's important, because when there are more than one, we're going to need those appointments, because somebody must take control and have accountability for bringing all the information together. The health and safety file is put together by the principal designer. The principal designer may leave before the project is over. If they do, that responsibility is passed to the principal contractor. So we can see the two clear phases there. But the next thing we must be really, really aware of, as we can see there, it is the client that has overall control and ownership of that entire project when they are a commercial client. We must also be thinking here, we can see this yellow box, because within that yellow box we're thinking of what the designers must do. We must eliminate, reduce and control risks through the design. We've looked at the design phase there. We must follow, or they must follow, the principles of prevention. We will cover that in a later module. And at all times we are thinking of the maintenance, cleaning and access to the finished project. And that's the last sort of pop-up slide there. And that's us, the consultant. Remember, we must be aware of all 5 elements of CDM, but we must be fully aware of this construction phase if we are going to be giving guidance or acting for any member whether we're acting for the principal designer, the client, or the principal contractor. As consultants and advisors, we must be fully knowledgeable of these 2 phases. A quick knowledge check. How many construction phases are there? Well, there are 2, the pre-construction and the construction phase. Which phase could be considered as the design phase? Remember, phase 1, because that's before construction. We are having to design in safety, design safety into the project. What are those 3 duty holders? They are the client, the principal designer and the principal contractor. They must work together to ensure health and safety, occupational health and safety is a priority. And that's the end of the module. So we should now have knowledge of the 2 phases of a construction project: pre-construction and construction. That's it. So good luck with your assessment.